Hey everyone, and welcome back to another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about Tesla and their big robotaxi gamble.
Sounds exciting.
It is, and a
Yeah.
little risky too from the sounds of things. Our main source today is going to be this article from the Motley Fool, and basically it's all about how the CEO of Uber, Dara Khosrowshahi, is warning Tesla investors that they're in for a rough ride.
Oh, a little CEO on CEO shade. That's always fun.
Right. But, he might have a point. I mean, Tesla is aiming to launch a robotaxi service in Austin this summer, like in a few months.
Wow, that's soon. That's really ambitious.
And get this, they're planning to just use their FSD software, the full self-driving thing.
Which, let's be honest, still has a long way to go before it's truly, ready for the masses.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what Khosrowshahi is getting at, I think. This whole thing could backfire big time if the tech isn't actually up to snuff.
And it's not just about the tech, right? Launching a service like this, it's a whole different ball game compared to, selling cars.
Right, like what about all the logistics? Managing a fleet of robotaxis, making sure there are enough cars where they need to be, dealing with customer service, all that stuff.
All huge challenges. Uber's been at it for years, and they've got a massive network of drivers and all this data they've been collecting. Tesla's starting from scratch here.
Which I guess is what makes it such a gamble. I mean, they're putting a lot on the line, their reputation, their stock price, everything. But, Tesla has always been kind of known for, taking risks and pushing the boundaries.
True, they kind of disrupted the whole electric car market, so maybe they can do it again with robotaxis.
Maybe. But this time, they're going up against some serious competition.
Yeah.
I mean, Waymo, the one backed by Google, they've been developing autonomous vehicles for ages.
Oh, for a long time, yeah. And they're already testing out robotaxi services in a few cities. They even partnered with Uber in Austin, which is pretty interesting.
So it's going to be a real showdown in Austin then. Tesla's bold, direct approach versus Waymo's more cautious, partnership-based strategy.
Exactly. It'll be fascinating to see which approach wins out in the long run. And how it all plays out for Tesla's, well, let's just say their stock is pretty volatile right now.
For sure. But Khosrowshahi, he's not just talking about the competition. He's specifically highlighting how hard it is to manage demand in the ride-sharing world. What's he getting at there?
Well, think about it. People need rides at all different times in all different places for all sorts of reasons. So making sure there are enough cars available exactly when and where people need them, that's a massive logistical challenge.
Oh, I see. So you don't want a bunch of empty robotaxis just driving around wasting energy.
Yeah.
But you also don't want people waiting forever for a ride and getting frustrated.
Right. It's all about finding that balance. And Uber's argument is basically, hey, we've already figured that part out. They've got all this data and experience and algorithms.
It does sound like Tesla has their work cut out for them. But they do have a few things going for them too, right? Like their brand is huge.
Oh, yeah. Their brand is super strong and they've got this loyal following. People love Tesla, so that could definitely give them an edge.
And they're not afraid to go all in on their vision, right? They just go for it.
That's true. They've got that bold, disruptive energy, and they're not afraid to, shake things up. Whether that's enough to overcome all the challenges, though, well, that's the big question.
And a question that we'll be exploring further in this deep dive. But before we get too far ahead, let's unpack this whole demand management thing a bit more. Khosrowshahi seems to think it's Tesla's biggest hurdle. Why is that such a big deal?
Because it's not just about having a cool car that can drive itself. It's about building a whole system that can handle the complexities of real-world transportation.
Like a whole ecosystem almost.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to think about routing, pricing, customer service, maintenance, and all that stuff on a massive scale. And you've got to do it efficiently, reliably, and safely. That's a tall order for any company, even one as innovative as Tesla.
It sounds like Tesla's really taken a huge gamble here then. But, hey, maybe that's what makes them so fascinating to watch.
For sure. They're not afraid to swing for the fences, and whether they hit a home run or strike out, it's going to be a wild ride.
All right, so we've established that Tesla's diving headfirst into this robotaxi thing, and there are a lot of potential pitfalls along the way. But let's play devil's advocate for a moment. What are some of Tesla's advantages in this race? Besides their brand, I mean. They've got that direct-to-consumer model, right?
Oh, right. That's a big one. They've got that direct connection with their customers, which gives them a lot of control over the whole experience. They don't have to rely on partnerships or third-party platforms.
And they're already experts at building and selling cars, so they've got that whole infrastructure in place. Plus, they're known for their software, too. Their cars are basically computers on wheels, right?
Yeah. And they've got a huge network of charging stations already, which could be a big advantage for their robotaxi fleet.
So it's not like they're starting from zero. They've got some serious assets they can leverage. But it still sounds like they're facing an uphill battle.
For sure, this is a whole new ballgame, and there are a lot of unknowns. But hey, that's what makes it so interesting.
All right, so we've talked about the risks, we've talked about the potential rewards, but let's not forget about the bigger picture here. This isn't just about Tesla making money or disrupting the taxi industry. This is about the future of transportation, right?
Absolutely. This is about how we're going to get around in the future, how our cities are going to be designed, how we're going to interact with technology. It's a huge deal.
So it's not just a business story. It's a story about how we live our lives. And the stakes are pretty high.
Very high. And that's why we're taking this deep dive, to explore all the different angles of this robotaxi revolution and understand what it means for all of us.
All right, so we've set the stage. Tesla's making a big bet on robotaxis. There are a lot of challenges, a lot of potential, a lot of unknowns. But where do we even begin to unpack all of this?
Well, I think a good place to start is by looking at some real-world examples of how this technology is already being used. Let's take a virtual trip to a few cities that are at the forefront of the robotaxi movement and see what we can learn from their experiences.
Okay, I'm ready to hit the virtual road. Where are we headed first?
How about Phoenix, Arizona? That's where Waymo has been running a fully driverless robotaxi service for a few years now.
Perfect. Buckle up, everyone. We're off to Phoenix. Okay, so we're here in sunny Phoenix, virtually at least, and Waymo's been running their robotaxi service, Waymo One, for a while now. What's the vibe there? What's it actually like?
Well, imagine minivans, but no drivers. That's basically Waymo One. They've got these Chrysler Pacificas outfitted with all the sensors and tech, and people in certain parts of Phoenix can just hail them through an app, kind of like you would with an Uber or Lyft.
So you're saying people are actually getting into cars with no one behind the wheel. Are they comfortable with that?
Yeah, it's pretty wild, right? And the reaction has been, mixed, but mostly positive, I'd say. Some people are a little freaked out, obviously, which is understandable. But a lot of the writers, they're actually raving about it, They like the convenience. They say the rides are smooth. And plus, no awkward small talk with the driver.
Yeah, I can definitely see the appeal in that. But come on, there have got to be some hiccups, right? I've read stories about these things getting confused or making weird decisions.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There have been some bumps in the road, no pun intended. There have been glitches, times when the vehicles get stumped by, some unusual situation, even a few fender benders here and there.
Okay, so it's not perfect.
But the thing is, Waymo's been pretty open about those incidents. They're using them to learn and improve, and they're constantly tweaking the technology and expanding the service area bit by bit.
So it's a work in progress, but they're taking it slow and steady, which seems, I don't know, like a smarter approach than just throwing it all out there and seeing what happens.
Right. It's definitely a contrast to Tesla's approach, which is much more, full speed ahead, disrupt everything. Waymo seems to be prioritizing safety and reliability above all else, which, makes sense when you're trying to win over public trust.
Okay, so Waymo's showing that robotaxis can kind of work in the real world, even if they're not flawless yet. But they're not the only players in this game, right? What about Cruise, the one backed by GM? They're doing some stuff in San Francisco, right?
Yeah, Cruise is up in San Francisco, and that's a whole other level of difficulty. San Francisco streets, they're notoriously challenging, all those hills, crazy traffic, and some pretty, let's just say, interesting drivers.
Oh, yeah, good point. So how are the robotaxis handling that chaos?
Well, they've definitely had their share of, let's call them learning experiences. There have been reports of cars blocking traffic, making some unexpected turns, that kind of thing.
So San Francisco is proving to be a tough testing ground, huh?
It is, but Cruise is making progress. They just announced they're going to start running a 24/7 robotaxi service in San Francisco, which is pretty huge.
Wait, 204/7? Are they sure about that? That seems like a big jump.
It's definitely ambitious, and it'll be really interesting to see if they can pull it off, managing all the logistics, making sure it's safe, especially at night, all that stuff.
Yeah, and what about the city itself? Are they on board with all this? I mean, cities aren't exactly designed for driverless cars, are they?
You're hitting on a really important point. The regulatory side of all this is huge. These companies, they have to work closely with city officials, convince them that their technology is safe, that they're not going to cause more problems than they solve.
So it's not just about the tech. It's about navigating all the rules and regulations, the politics, all that stuff.
Exactly, and that's something we're seeing everywhere, not just in the US. As this technology spreads, cities are going to have to adapt, figure out how to integrate these robotaxis into their transportation systems.
Speaking of which, we should probably talk about China, right? I feel like they're light years ahead of us in this whole autonomous vehicle thing.
Yeah, China's definitely pushing the boundaries. They've got companies like Baidu. They're doing some really impressive stuff with their robotaxi service, Apollo Go. They're already running it in several cities, like thousands of vehicles on the road.
Wow, thousands. That's crazy. Why are they so far ahead? Is it just because, like, their government is more supportive of this kind of thing?
Yeah, partly. The Chinese government has been really proactive, investing heavily in research, setting up these testing zones, making it easier for companies to get permits and stuff.
Yeah,
They see this technology as like a national priority.
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it does make you wonder if the US is falling behind, all this bureaucracy and red tape.
Yeah, it's a concern. We've got a strong track record of innovation in the U.S., but sometimes it feels like we're moving slower than we could be. It's at that whole balance, right?
Right.
Safety versus innovation. You don't want to rush things and put people at risk, but you also don't want to stifle progress. It's a tough one.
It is. And it's not just about speed, it's also about approach. Waymo's cautious rollout, Cruise's trial by fire in San Francisco, China's government-led push, they're all different models, and it's not clear yet which one will be the most successful in the long run.
It's like a giant experiment playing out on a global scale.
Hmm.
Pretty fascinating, actually. But let's zoom out for a minute and talk about the bigger picture, the societal impact of all this. We've touched on it a bit, but I think it deserves a deeper dive.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't just about, cool cars that can drive themselves. This has the potential to reshape our cities, change how we work, how we live, everything.
So where do we even begin to unpack all of that? It's a huge topic.
Well, let's start with accessibility. One of the big promises of robotaxis is that they could make transportation more accessible for people with disabilities, for elderly folks who can't drive anymore, anyone who has difficulty getting around.
Right. That's a really important point. I hadn't really thought about that aspect of it.
Yeah, imagine someone in a wheelchair. They can just hail a robotaxi and go anywhere they want, independently, without having to rely on someone else. That could be life-changing.
That's a really powerful image. But what about the cost? I mean, will this technology be accessible to everyone, or will it just be a luxury for the wealthy?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's something we need to think carefully about. If these services are too expensive, or if they're only available in certain neighborhoods, then we're just creating another form of inequality.
So it's not just about the tech itself. It's about how we implement it, how we make sure it benefits everyone, not just a select few.
Exactly. And it's not just about cost, it's also about access. Like, if all the robotaxis are concentrated in downtown areas, what about people who live in the suburbs or rural areas?
Yeah, good point. Okay, so we've got accessibility, we've got equity. What about the environment? I mean, electric robotaxis sounds good in theory, but could they actually make things worse, like by encouraging more people to drive or contributing to sprawl?
That's a valid concern, and it's complex. The environmental impact is going to depend on a lot of factors, like where the electricity comes from, how efficiently these cars are routed, whether they lead to more or fewer cars on the road overall.
Right, so it's not as simple as just saying electric cars are good for the environment, end of story.
Exactly. We need to look at the whole picture, the whole system, and think about the unintended consequences.
Okay, so we've got the economic side, the environmental side, the social impact, and then there's this whole other layer of, I don't know, philosophical stuff, right? Like, how will this change our relationship with technology, with each other, with the world around us?
Oh, for sure. There are some big existential questions here, like, will we become more isolated as we spend more time in our little robotaxi bubbles staring at our phones? Or will this free up our time and energy to connect with people in new ways?
Yeah, it's like a double-edged sword, right? More time, but also potentially less human interaction.
It's a paradox. And it's hard to say how it's all going to shake out, but I think it comes down to how we choose to use this technology, how we design it, how we regulate it.
So it's not just about the tech itself, it's about the choices we make as individuals, as a society.
Exactly. And that's something we need to be mindful of as we move forward with all this. We have a chance to shape this technology, to make it work for us, not the other way around.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about real-world examples. We've talked about the bigger societal implications. But there's one piece of the puzzle we haven't really dug into yet. Artificial intelligence, or AI.
Oh, yeah, that's the brain behind all of this. We've mentioned it, but it's definitely worth taking a closer look at how AI is driving this whole robotaxi revolution.
All right, let's dive into the AI rabbit hole. So we've explored how AI is shaping autonomous vehicles, and it really feels like we're on the edge of a major transportation shift. But let's bring it back down to earth for a second. What does all this mean for the average person?
Well, I think it's easy to get caught up in the hype, all the futuristic visions and stuff, but it's important to remember that these changes, they're not going to happen overnight. Think of it like, remember the early days of the internet? People were making all sorts of crazy predictions.
Oh, totally, like the paperless office. I think I'm still waiting on that one.
Right, exactly. My point is these transitions take time. And yeah, there will be some disruptions along the way, but there will also be a lot of new opportunities. The key is to be, adaptable and focus on developing those skills that are going to be valuable in this new world.
So instead of freaking out about robots taking over, maybe we should be thinking about how to, ride this wave of change. But where do we even start?
I think a good place to start is by focusing on those skills that AI can't easily replicate, things like critical thinking, complex problem solving, creativity, emotional intelligence. Those are the things that make us uniquely human.
So it's not just about learning to code, although that's probably not a bad idea either. It's about honing those skills that make us human, make us adaptable.
Exactly. And it makes sense if you think about the potential impact on the workforce. As robotaxis become more common, certain jobs like, taxi driving, truck driving, those might start to decline. But that also means there will be new jobs emerging in other areas.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, think about all the people needed to develop the software for these robotaxis, to analyze all the data they collect, to maintain them, even things like customer service for robotaxi fleets. There will be a whole new ecosystem of jobs popping up.
So it's not a simple equation of robots taking our jobs. It's more like a reshuffling of the deck.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to require people to be willing to learn new skills and adapt to this new landscape.
Exactly. And that's why I think it's important to focus on that human-AI collaboration. It's not about one replacing the other. It's about finding ways for them to work together, to complement each other's strengths.
Instead of fearing a robot takeover, maybe we should be thinking about building a future where humans and AI can, coexist and thrive together.
I like that. That's the ideal scenario. And it's going to require some careful planning, some thoughtful regulations, and a real commitment to making sure that AI is developed and used in a way that benefits everyone.
Okay, so that's a more hopeful way to look at it. But let's
Yeah.
be real for a second. What's the timeline here? Are we all going to be hailing robotaxis in, the next 5 years, 10 years?
Well, it's tough to say for sure, but I think the pace of development is only going to pick up from here. AI is getting more and more sophisticated. The sensors are getting better and cheaper. So it's really not a matter of if, but when.
So you're saying it's inevitable robotaxis are coming?
Pretty much, yeah. But it's not going to be like an overnight switch. There are still some big hurdles to clear. Regulations, public perception, the whole safety testing thing.
And we can't forget about the ethical considerations, right?
Mhm.
Making sure these systems are fair, transparent, accountable.
Oh, absolutely. Those conversations are really important. But I think it's also important to acknowledge the sense of excitement and possibility here. This technology has the potential to really transform transportation as we know it.
It does feel like we're standing on the edge of a new frontier. A little scary, a little exciting.
It is. It's a time for cautious optimism, I'd say. We need to be aware of the risks, but also open to the possibilities.
So if we could sum it all up for our listeners today, what would you say is the main takeaway from all this? What should they be thinking about as they, try to make sense of this rapidly changing world?
Don't just sit back and watch this revolution happen. Participate in it. Stay informed about the latest developments, get involved in the conversations about the ethics of AI, and help shape the future of transportation.
Love that. We're not just passengers on this ride. We're the drivers.
Exactly. And hey, who knows, maybe someday soon we'll all be cruising around in robotaxis, sipping our coffee, having these kinds of deep dive conversations, but without having to worry about traffic.
Now that's a future I can get behind. And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of robotaxis and the AI that powers them. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.